A new winter weather pattern is expected as we close out January and push towards February, and this could bring chances for snowfall to areas that have not seen much so far this winter. This video has everything that you need to know on the forecast trends ahead into the next several days. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to tune into this video. I want to start by giving you a look at blended guidance with your European ensembles, showing a 15 to 20,000 foot region of the atmosphere. We're going to be focusing on where the jet stream's diving down, as indicated by those blues, where we'll be likely seeing cooler than average air as a result of those dips. And then those oranges and reds where you see ridges indicating warmer than average air likely into those zones based on this blended guidance. Starting off with what's going on in the overall pattern up into the atmosphere as we finish this week, those blues from the central to the eastern U.S. indicating an anomalous jet stream dip. This is what has caused that winter weather pattern as we've gone over the last week or so, and it's really been pretty active winter weather-wise for weeks now. Now it's just cold, drier for a lot of folks, and then we're going to see the pattern begin to shift, as indicated by some of these new colors, these oranges shifting in from the Gulf, moving north by the time we go towards the upcoming weekend, say around Saturday, January 25th. These oranges indicate a ridge beginning to build into the southeastern quadrant of the United States. This is not going to bring temperatures above average in many cases as early as Saturday, for example, but what this is going to do is start to level out temperatures, bring them at least a little bit closer to normal, although that will be a little bit of a struggle with those continued blues you see moving through the Great Lakes and Northeast, indicating clipper systems, pretty typical for January and February in the wintertime, making their way from northwest to southeast and continuing to bring in cool air. You can see those troughs continuing, especially closer to the northeast coast of the U.S. as we go into the early part of next week. But overall, that ridge that was building out of the south is especially going to start moving up into the plains by the time we go out of Monday into Tuesday, with a new ridge also coming out of parts of the Mountain West to combine up with that. Between these two areas of warmer than average air, we're likely going to see temperatures begin to get well above average into the early to the middle part of next week into the central United States, possibly setting us up for our next winter storm pattern with that area of blue indicating that next trough back there into the southwest, beginning to try and make a run for that area of warmth by the time we go out of Tuesday into Wednesday and really into the few last days of January. You could see it here by the time we go out of Wednesday, January 29th into our Thursday, January 30th, with our ridge continuing to build up here through the central U.S. and also push east over an expanding zone by this point in time, even forcing off that big trough for a lot of the northeastern U.S. It looks like the overall pattern is going to shift where we're going to have a low trying to work into this. And whenever you have a low pressure area and a trough working into an area of ridging, that can often mean active weather, rain for a lot of folks, but considering it's wintertime, warmer than average air doesn't necessarily mean you can't see snow on the northern side of a system, and it looks like it might be the plains and into the upper Midwest with a system like this that we'd have to watch, and the confidence is growing for that type of pattern to set up as we finish January and push into early February, before we might see another much colder pattern begin to develop for at least some parts of the U.S., as indicated by these deeper blues starting to force your ridging to the southeast into February. That's a talk for another time, but you see the overall pattern and these new storm setup that we're going to have to watch for sure based on that overview that I just provided. With that overview of the upcoming pattern in mind, I want to go ahead and give you a look at a more easy-to-understand graphic showing general zones where we're looking at the possibility of rainfall and snowfall with this blended GFS ensemble guidance as we push through the rest of January, starting off with a time that's pretty high confidence in terms of what's going to be going on as we push into the upcoming weekend. Let's start here just with, say, the middle of the afternoon into our Saturday, January 25th of 2025. Let's look at what's going on in all of the zones around this time. This is when we're going to begin seeing some warmer than average air trying to slide on up here, especially into the central U.S., with a little bit of moisture return that could also eventually accompany that as we close out this weekend down here in the southern corridor of the country. While that's going on, we're dry here for the meantime, but it is looking like further north we're going to continue to remain a little bit more active with some of these snow shots, especially riding the Canadian border, coming through the Great Lakes, and of course getting lake enhanced with bigger cool downs, especially in this region, and that will continue even into the early part of next week. And then also look at this energy here into parts of Nevada, Utah, and Colorado. Snow is going to continue to linger around, not necessarily heavy snow, but some snow in this region as we go through the weekend into the early part of next week, and some of that is going to be associated with that energy that is likely going to try and eventually make a run for the plains. So a lot of little features to watch going on. Overall, the similar pattern setup continues with clippers in the north, some energy back in the southwest U.S. into our Sunday, but we are going to watch a little system that's pretty unrelated to the overall pattern changes going on here, down into parts of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi, particularly these zones with some rainfall more than likely as we go out of Sunday into Monday of next week. It's going to be pretty quick impacts. We could see some light rain also try to slide into the southeast out of that. But when we're looking for those bigger scale pattern changes as a result of that huge ridge forming in the central U.S. and that cooler air that's stuck in the Rockies trying to move out into that, that's as we go out of around Wednesday, January 29th, and into our Thursday, January 30th. You can see it here. Deep greens indicating a big signal for some likely rain and maybe even thunderstorms that could cause maybe even isolated severe weather and flooding down here towards parts of the south central plains and the lower Mississippi Valley, possibly with any system that we see develop down here, even with a ridge into the central plains and into the Midwest. As cool as it is in the winter, warmer than average air, it doesn't necessarily mean you still can't see snowfall. And if there's any quarter that we'd have to watch with a system mid to late next week, it would probably be in this general zone, pushing out of the southwestern U.S. in the Four Corners, and then moving out through parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and eventually into these upper Midwest zones. Either way, it looks like a bigger scale system's coming into the middle to the back half of next week, and that's why I show you these types of long-range setups, because in this case, it's probably going to bring some snow, if this signal continues to last, to a new zone, and that could be the Central Plains and Midwest, as opposed to, say, the Southeast U.S. Active weather could definitely continue into February, but that's just a trend and nothing that we can really focus on too specifically just yet. Just to give you one last perspective on all those changes on the way and that snow signal that's possible, let's see if the European ensembles are showing with their 2-day snowfall increments that we could see a snow maybe somewhere towards the central U.S. as we go towards the middle to the back half of next week. Let's run through the near term here first, though, with those forecasted snow totals through the upcoming weekend. This is from Saturday morning through the early Monday morning time frame. No one really expected to get crazy snow, but definitely a couple inches in many spots on up here through the north central U.S., pushing into the northeast as we continue to watch those clippers. That will continue to bring cool downs with those troughs digging in even as far south as the Ohio Valley down to the mid-Atlantic and southeast, feeling the impacts of the cooler than average air. And these types of clippers will continue all the way through the midweek portion of next week, all the way up until we start to see the ridge build in ahead of this. Yep, there's your snow already building with that low that's eventually going to move into your ridge into the central U.S. around middle to back half of next week. As early as Saturday, Sunday, into Monday, snow back on up here into California, Nevada, and then even those higher elevations in the Rockies of Utah, southern Wyoming, and into northern Colorado. Again, watch that snow down there. It takes a while to move out of the southwest, but eventually it makes a run to the east. And I don't think you can get much better of a signal than this. X marks the spot coming out of Colorado and New Mexico, up here into places like Kansas, up into the upper Midwest, looking like a pretty good stripe of snow that could form somewhere in here if this signal continues to hold and increase. Here's a final look at my official recap with a custom graphic for our wintry signal from around January 29th through 31st. This is the furthest I want to go out with a signal, but I'm telling you, X marks the spot coming out of the Four Corners into the Central Plains and the Midwest. Somewhere in this bright blue, seeing increasing confidence already for a big event sometime as we go to the middle to the back half of next week. Keep an eye on it, and I will keep you updated right here, so subscribe. Keep all those trends I've been showing throughout this video in mind as I give you a look at these temperatures forecasted day by day into the afternoon highs as we go through at least the early to the mid part of next week. Let's start with our Friday, January 24th, since that is tomorrow. Looking at what's going to be going on across the U.S. overall, you can see those zones I was talking about already beginning to take hold. First of all, continuing to watch numbers like these. These are not going to be uncommon with teens, 20s, and 30s over a lot of the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley into the northeast, with continued clippers even through Tuesday and Wednesday at least of the next week time frame. Down here closer to the Gulf Coast, though, we are rebounding as that southern ridge is going to begin to try and slip in as early as Friday, but especially to Saturday. These 40s are definitely going to be enough to melt a lot of that rare snowfall. In fact, that historic snow that fell, bringing almost a foot to some regions here from the Texas Gulf Coast all the way over to Florida, which is crazy to say. Just earlier this week, already back up to the 40s and 50s by Friday, and it's just going to continue to build as we go into Saturday. Notice a lot more 40s and 50s down here in the south, continuing with some 20s in the north, but you can begin to see some changes as we go through Sunday and especially towards Monday. Look at what happens by our Monday, January 27th. This is National Weather Service guidance showing that ridge really beginning to develop here into the central United States, with not only 50s and 60s closer to the Gulf Coast, but expanding with at least some upper 40s as far north here as Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, into parts of Nebraska, Iowa, and the Dakotas. Even though we're still not even cracking freezing for highs along that Canadian border there in the northeastern quadrant of the U.S., this zone beginning with the ridging, we're still cold down here into parts of the Rockies, and when you've got the contrast between the Rockies and the Central Plains, I'm telling you, something's bound to form as you go deeper into next week. By Tuesday, warming up even more east of the Rockies. By Wednesday, warming up more. You can really see it right there. There's your big dip in the jet stream. There's your big ridge. Just a setup for low pressures to ride along, and eventually with that setup trending east, That's why I think we could get a snowfall into this general zone of the country. I'm telling you, that's coming. If not into the last few days of January, definitely by the early couple days of February, with this kind of high temperature setup already showing that in place as well. That being said, that leads me into the recap of this more long-range type of outlook. Of course, first of all, we're looking at generally quieter weather here in the near term. Clippers in the northeast, a little snow back towards the Rockies, but most zones quiet until we get to that more active pattern as we go towards next week, especially towards the middle of the back half of the week. That could mean our next snow chance is further northwest than what we've been seeing recently towards the plains instead of the southeast U.S. That's a weird thing to say, but here we are. 2025 starting off weird. Hope it's not too dangerous in terms of weather across the country, but of course I'll keep you updated as we go throughout the year. If you hit that subscribe button down below and get more updates from me in the future, I'll see you back here next time at
One Nation Weather.